business advisor and supply chain expert. And welcome back to my podcast, The Morning Mood. I am back with Andrew, and we are going to continue our conversation about Amazon Global and how we built the first cross-border e-commerce business, basically, right? So welcome back, Andrew. Thanks for being here. So the last couple of episodes, Andrew and I talked to you about what were some of the technical challenges that were going on for us, and also what were the business challenges that drove Amazon to build the Amazon, what would be eventually be known as the Amazon Global Business. And so what was going on from a customer's perspective is that people were actually coming to Amazon from other countries to buy our products. So they were actually already doing it. But what was happening is that if it wasn't a book or a DVD or music or things that were generally duty free, when it was showing up at their door, they were getting a bill. And a lot of times what they were doing is just rejecting the package and saying, I don't want it, and then going back to Amazon and asking for a refund.
Bill could be more than the cost of the item. This is not a
Yes.
small bill.
Yeah, that was the issue, is that the bill could be very, very big. And so this created two issues for Amazon. One was that we had a very bad customer experience because they didn't know this was going to happen. It showed up. They're very upset about it. And so, as you know, Amazon's very customer centric. So first and foremost, we needed to solve this problem for our customers. We knew we had demand for it. The second thing is that leaving all that inventory abandoned in another country was starting to create some tax and liability issues that Amazon was not really comfortable with. And we knew would grow over time. So we needed to solve it and be able to tell the customer when they checked out on the Amazon.com website to start that how much it would actually cost for them to get it to their door. And we guaranteed it. We said, we promise you this is how much it's going to cost you. If it costs you more, Amazon's going to eat it. And this is important because Andrew and I are going to talk about what we had to do this. Amazon's going to absorb it. And if we overbilled you by law, we have to give it back to you. So we have to refund it. So very complex problem to be solved at this time in Amazon. So I'm going to walk you guys through what the business solutions were. Andrew has talked us through some of the technical solutions that he built. And today we're going to talk about what are the business processes that I had to build. And Andrew is going to share how we had to use technology to solve all of this, because there was no way that we were doing this without technology. Andrew, anything you want to add before I get going here?
I think that pretty well covers it.
Good.
Nobody had ever done this before, so it was making everything up from scratch and keeping in mind Amazon's culture at the time of 1,000 little startups. So we were doing this in that universe of you don't have a single person you can go talk to say, put this on your priority list and it's done. We had 24 to 30 different teams to talk to.
Oh yeah, when we added tax and legal and all the merch teams and category teams that we talked to, it was over 25 very easily. And I do want to just hammer that point a little harder. I hammered this point really hard when we were talking with Torsten about building out EU logistics. What Andrew and I are talking about are not implementing some solution, third-party solution, and then we implemented it in Amazon. Like, we actually built this, the whole business, the processes, the thought, the whole thing. We were using a light duty classification engine. I will call it a light duty calculation engine. It did not perform well, which is why we ended up building our own. But this is something that was built from nothing. And I think that's what makes these stories so interesting. Also, Carrie's story about private label, building it from nothing. And we didn't have big teams. We didn't go out and hire, 42 people before we started building. It was like, it's you, and now go prove you're right. All right. So the first thing that we ran into, and this is really interesting, and hopefully I can get Ron Lee on here to talk about this as well, is that there was not an Incoterm that represented what Amazon wanted to do. So for all y'all out there who don't know what, yeah, I was going to say, for all y'all who don't know what an Incoterm is,
I mean, I had to learn this crap, so does everybody else.
Yeah. If you were not happy about it, I remember you were like, why do I have to learn this? And so an Incoterm basically dictates the terms of sale in an international shipment, and it dictates who's responsible for certain aspects in a supply chain. So who's responsible for getting it on the ship, who pays the ocean freight, who does the customs clearance, who's the importer of record, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, What Amazon was doing was what was called DDP, which is duty delivered paid. And in the case of a DDP, the shipper is the importer of record. And this is where we ran into a problem because Amazon did not want to be the importer of record in all of these countries, especially countries that they did not have a presence in because of tax liability. All fair, not criticizing them for doing it or implying that we're doing anything wrong. It was just awareness of what we were doing. And so we could not be importer of record. Amazon could not be importer of record. So we had to work with our carriers, and only one could handle it, and that was DHL. And we created a new Ecoterm that was called DPP. And that basically told DHL to customs clear it. We're going to provide you all the information. You're going to bill all the duties and taxes back to Amazon, but the customer is the importer of record. And at that point, that had never been done. The carriers, DHL, everybody was like, no, 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 no. We don't, there is no Ecoterm for this. And so we created a new one. We worked with DHL and convinced them to create an Ecoterm for just us to use. And then, as you mentioned, also, Andrew, then we had to go back and reconfigure a whole bunch of shipping engine stuff so that we could pass that information to the carrier. So that was kind of that was the first hurdle that we had to get through, was getting carriers to finally agree to recognize this term that no one had ever heard of. The next big piece was the data transmission piece. Now, all of this is happening because we're trying to ship, right? So we're also working on classification, adding new products, new countries, and all this is happening. But at the same time, we're trying to ship anything that we can while we're trying to grow. So we had this big piece, which was the data transmission. We had to transmit a manifest, which wasn't something that we had done with all of the data elements for an international shipment, because we were now
Amazon already had a big system for sending manifests. Here's all the packages, here's where they're
Yep.
going, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we basically had to go to a sister team in the
Yeah.
transportation department and say, we would like to add this to your schedule, please.
Yeah.
We've got all these extra fields that you now have to have for this tiny fraction. And it
Yeah.
even went so far as going into the fulfillment centers and saying, we need to change what gets printed on the label
Yes.
to have
We had
this
to.
new term on the label.
I
So
forgot we
there
had to change
was,
the label.
yep. So there's two teams already that we had to go negotiate with and ask to get something on their docket.
Just to get something just to get a carrier to pick up something. Yeah.
Yep.
So that in and of itself was a lift, and that took a couple of months. But the other really interesting part of this is what I mentioned in the beginning, is that when we started this program, we said, we guarantee the duty. So if I told you it was $12 and it was 10, I owe you $2. But if it was 15, Amazon was eating that. So that one drove us that we wanted to get our duty calculation as accurate as possible, because Amazon did not want to
If
make this
not
a cost center.
overestimate a little bit. Refunding is cheaper than eating it.
So, but we introduced this whole new process of refunding a customer without them
Well,
asking
after
for
the
it.
shipment, which had never been done before.
Well after the shipment, we're talking 2, 3, maybe even a month after the shipment has arrived.
In
The
fact, I don't
customer
think
did
we
not
ever
initiate
refunded
it.
a customer without also doing a return.
Yes, right. There's no product return. The customer did not initiate it. And we were returning a tax, which was also like, ooh, this is weird, right? Because we don't do this. So you want to talk to us a little bit, Andrew, about how, from a technical perspective, we started tackling that beast, right?
Yeah. I mean, the most important thing was, in order to do a refund, you have to know what they paid in the first place, and you have to
Yeah.
know what they actually were charged at the border.
Yeah.
So the first part of that, we built a service that the ordering system would call to say, hey, what should we put in front of the customer to tell them what they're paying?
Yep.
And at the time, we were starting out trying to be real scrappy. So we did a third party thing. We integrated into our systems. That's what we were using. So we would get the information from the order pipeline. We would go to our third party thing. We'd work out the differences between the two softwares. And we'd come up with
Which
something that
were
we
sizable.
told back to the ordering system. And we didn't always get answers we liked. And so we had a layer that would fudge things a little. usually in the side of let's overestimate upfront so that we don't have to eat it in the back end.
Yeah.
And
There were some, if I recall correctly, there were some nuanced taxes that weren't quite covered correctly in the third party that we were using
yeah,
because it wasn't just duty that we had to deal with. We were getting into
there's
VAT and
VAT and GST and all
HST and
sorts of stuff. Yeah.
PST and
And
CSTs
it
and
just didn't do some of them. And
yeah,
they were
it
upfront
just
about that they didn't do them, but
yeah.
that we still
But
got
we had to
charged them
have
in the
it.
end. So we had to get the calculation in there somehow.
We had to have it. And the other thing that I remember you and I working really hard on because of this particular issue was the order in which all the
Yeah.
taxes were done. And I don't remember what it was, but I remember it had to be done
In
like
general,
duty,
all of
then
these
tax,
taxes
then
are
this.
really complicated for
Yeah.
this
And then,
reason. Because
yeah.
it's
And
always percentage of something, but percentage of what?
it
And in
was the
what order
what.
do you apply them?
Yeah. Yeah. And then some of them, there was a tax that was actually on the cost of goods. And it was a
Yeah.
mess. So we did a lot of work on making that happen. So that
Well,
was step number one.
that's only the beginning of it, because
Yeah.
now that it's in the order pipeline, it has to go into the shipping because it has to get attached to the shipping data. It then has to go into the fulfillment centers to follow the packages as it goes through that whole system. And in the end, after the fulfillment center, it comes back to transportation. And it sits in a database of packages that we know we've sent with all their details. And it just waits
Yeah.
for days, weeks, whatever,
It
until the
was
package
it
gets
was
delivered.
2 to 3 weeks. Yeah, we
And
were
then
getting them
we'd
back.
get a huge manifest back again from the carrier saying, in the past 2 weeks, we delivered all these project packages for you. And then we had to build a system that would go through and reconcile the two. And most carriers, DHL fortunately included, would allow us to attach our own identifiers to things so that we could say
Yes.
this one goes to that one and this one goes to that one.
That was a big issue because I forgot about that
Yeah.
because we didn't have when we first started, we didn't have the order numbers. So I forgot about
We
that.
had a
So we had to
totally
go
different identifier that we
we had
had
to
to
find the
then
tracking
reconcile.
number and
Yeah.
then we go find the order number and that was a mess.
Yeah.
And we keep talking about how scrappy we were. We started doing this on Excel spreadsheets. Like the beginning of we started all right, I'm just going to say it.
Because you could
We
count on
started
two
everything
hands
on
how
an
many
Excel
of these
spreadsheet.
orders you got in a day.
Yeah. And we did because we first started out, it was a couple hundred orders a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
And then it was a couple thousand a week. And then it was,
And eventually the guys were in finance like, okay, no more spreadsheets. You need to figure your shit out.
yeah, the finance guys were like, no more. Yeah, I remember that when the finance guys came to us. We got behind is what happened. We ended up being like 12 weeks
Yeah.
behind. And they were like, look, well, we can't V-lookup this for the rest of our lives.
You guys need to grow up and do a real thing
Need to
here.
grow up.
And we did, and we wrote a thing, and it automatically did the refunds and
It
processed
did.
everything, and it works fine.
And it worked fine. And everybody got their money back.
But
And
we
it's also
shipped well before we got to that point, and that's
we did.
one of the lessons I have learned in my career in startups is if you're not embarrassed by the first thing that you ship, you waited too long.
Oh my God. That is gold. That's going on a short. If you are not embarrassed by the first thing that you built, you waited too long.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. I wouldn't
And
say I
I've
was
seen that time
embarrassed
and
by
time
what we were
again. I've
doing,
been part of startups that failed because they waited and they shipped something they were proud of, which is a capital mistake as a startup. And I've also been part of startups that did pretty well because that's not what they did. They shipped the ugly ducking and it grew up into this proverbial
this
swan
beautiful
eventually.
swan. Yeah, I
But,
talk about
it
that
was
all the
out there in the
time.
world for a while as very much an ugly duckling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's very
and
much what we
that's
did here, and that's part of the success of it is we didn't wait too long. We didn't get everything figured out before we started seeing if it works.
yeah, we just started shipping and getting people's money back and as it scaled and it scaled fast as I've talked about before. Extremely fast. And that was a product I want to, they start hearing these multi-billion dollar startups, right? That was a product of Amazon. So lots of people had multi-billion dollar startups at Amazon at the time. I was not the only one building a multi-billion dollar startup at the time. That was a product of the market and that e-commerce was just on fire then. And we will never see anything like that. And a product, of course, of Amazon. All right. So we've talked about now we have to do duty calculation. We have to do this reconciliation. We're doing it on Excel spreadsheets. The finance team is like, if I see one more Excel spreadsheet, we're not doing it. It was actually accounting that we had to work with a lot too.
Hmm.
And there was some liability because these were taxes, right? And we had to be very careful with how
We
we
had
did
to
this.
create a whole new LLC, which was
Yeah, I
responsible for that.
forgot
Had its
about
own bank
that.
account. It was not part of Amazon because it was dealing with this whole thing, and there was
This
a
whole
lot of
tax thing.
legal liability around. Amazon cannot hold taxes
Right.
for clients. That is not
Yeah, you
permitted.
cannot. No, no, no. Yeah. That's a customs law,
Yeah.
was that you
And so
cannot
that
profit off of
that's
duty.
right. And
Yeah.
so there's this whole, I don't know if it was classified as a nonprofit. I think it was just an LLC.
I think it was just an LLC, but we zeroed it out. Like it
Yeah.
was zeroed
But it
out.
had to zero out every month, and the accounting had to be exact
Yeah, it
because
had to be very
the
precise.
I got pulled into. I was also the leader of the shipment tracking team at the same time. So all the stuff Kim and I are talking about was one of my big projects. The other was actually running the "Where's My Stuff" feature on the
Yeah.
website. So yeah, I was doing both. I actually got pulled into a meeting by legal at this time. Somebody had sued Amazon from the state of Illinois, claiming that they were holding inventory and doing business. They had physical premises in Illinois and
Oh
therefore should
yeah,
be
this is
paying
before
sales
Nexus.
tax.
Yeah.
And this is a tax nexus issue long before Amazon had a physical presence in Illinois, which of course they do now. This is old
Yeah.
news.
But we
Um,
don't play those games anymore. But yeah, okay.
and some lawyer had seen that his shipment tracking status had moved instantaneously from something in Kentucky to something in Illinois. And it's like, I've got you. I've got you. And he brought it up with the attorney general and he filed this whole thing. And I got pulled in as the person who led the shipment tracking team
Yeah.
to say, could you like pull our bacon out of the fire?
Yeah.
And I had to prove in a way that would stand up in a hearing that this wasn't what it seemed like. We're not really holding this inventory or doing business in this place. And,
Yeah. It actually
walked
did
through how
transport.
FedEx's events work and how the timings work and how all the timestamps work. And it was this whole complicated legal evidence finding procedure that the legal team needed to defend itself.
Oh yeah.
So
Legal was a
when
big
I
part of our
say
lives.
legal stuff mattered to this global direct or whatever they're calling it now, um, this is the kind of stuff Amazon dealt with on the regular at
Yeah.
this point in time.
Yeah. We
So
mentioned
there was
like,
every attorney general in the world was just waiting
oh,
for us to screw up.
oh yeah, we had customs was watching. We had a few customs visits. Nothing that Amazon did wrong, by the way. But yeah, we had the old handcuffs and guns show up. That was a tense situation. But we were, to your point, we were kind of a target because we were growing so fast and we were doing things that nobody was doing before. So we were kind of a target. So we talked a little bit about the data, and this reconciliation piece was a big business hurdle we had to get through. The other thing was the duty. We talked about the duty calculation, but we actually had to classify all of these products to figure out their duty. So
What does that even mean, Kim? Nobody knows what
what
you're
was
talking
that?
about.
Right. So what does that even mean? So here's how I equate this. So an HTS is basically like a tax code, and it tells you, depending on what your product is, you get a number, and that tells you how much duty and taxes you have to pay. In today's environment, with all this, political environment, everybody should know what a tariff is. So, but just in case, but we had to take millions of products,
I
literally.
think that you're underselling how difficult this was. Kim has lived in this world her whole life, and she doesn't like understand how weird this is anymore.
Okay.
Her explanation
No.
to me when I was first learning all this stuff, it's like this is a rule book that was laid down in 1740
Oh yes,
and
true.
basically hasn't changed.
Yes, also true.
So I looked at the harmonized tariff code. I like pulled up the book and I like looked through it. And it starts off with lumber unprocessed, bark
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
lumber processed, bark off,
Yeah.
lumber boards squared within 12 inches by 12 inches, lumber flat boards no higher than 2 inches. It's like it goes on and on and
On
off.
and on and on.
Pork
This
salted in
took
brine, pork
terms.
salted in, I mean, just like,
Uh,
holy crap.
yeah.
But it's like, okay, this is great if you're operating a sailing ship in 1790.
Yeah.
I'm selling CDs and
Yeah.
computer software.
Yeah.
Like, where does this even? And it's like
We're
computer
trying to
laser
sell tracks
disc.
to Australia. Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and all of digital media, whether it's software or music or whatever, is like compact disc, less than 12 inches. Period. There's one code for all of
There's
that
one
stuff.
code for all of
But if
that.
you want to sell shoes, there's
Oh,
like
yes.
200 codes for shoes.
Yep. At least.
It's not just these are shoes. This
No.
is a shoe with a synthetic sole and a pseudo leather upper with Kevlar laces that was made in Malaysia.
And which shift the country of origin because like because of the value. We didn't have to get into that, thank God, because we were doing export. But yeah, but in the import value, your world. Okay, you're right. So it was way more complex. And it was kind of weird, right?
But it's like
Because
in the Amazon catalog, nobody cares about whether the timber has bark on it or not. We don't keep that information. So we
yeah.
were like looking at the product catalog saying, okay, we have to classify these things and we have to get it right because one, getting it wrong, you get penalized,
Yep.
right? If you come in with data that's wrong, they will then add another thing, which we didn't anticipate, which means we start eating money
We start
on the
becoming a cost
shipment.
center, yeah.
Plus the tariff codes, what product it is, different products have different percentages. So if
Yeah.
you guess wrong and it was one of the cheaper ones that you guessed, you start looking like you're trying to game the system. And of course, every lawyer in the world is watching us to see
And everybody's
exactly this.
watching us in every country's. And the other thing is that we were exporting to other countries. And with the myth of the harmonized tariff, right? We discovered very quickly is that there is actually no harmonized tariff. They're different by every country.
Hmm.
They're not even in the EU. They're slightly different by country. And so then we had to solve for that. Like so, a diamond ring classification into the UK and Germany might be the same, but if we
But was
wanted
it
to
a
send it
square setting or a round setting, Kip? You
yeah,
need to
yeah,
know
and
that.
if we wanted to send it yeah, and if we but we wanted to send it to, India, that was a totally different classification, and they had requirements, and they had all these other things. So it was a big job. And when you look at it from just the bold face of it as this huge multi-million product catalog at Amazon, and this huge multi-million HTS tomes that we're getting from Amazon, it was like, how do you ever put these two things together and poop out something discrete?
Well, it turns out you do it with spreadsheets and manual calculations at first.
And this just when we only had 66,000 lines, I think was the cap or something. So we had to do two spreadsheets. Yeah, thank God for Excel. That's all I have to say.
No, I
So
mean
that was
we seriously would go through our products. I would generate a file that was a CSV file. We had an FTP uplink to a third party that did all this classification stuff for us.
yeah.
The ones that Kim didn't do herself because it got
That
overwhelming
I
at
did a
some
lot of
point.
my on my own.
Um,
Yeah.
and then they would send us an email that they had finished, and then I'd run a script that would go download from FTP their results,
Yeah.
and then work that back into our system. It was
Yeah.
very low tech.
It was very low tech. We started doing manual classifications. I have arthritis in my mouse finger from all of the scrolling. But we did our manual classifications for probably a good year. And then we went with a third party that was doing sort of auto classification.
That was after
Um,
me, yeah.
yeah. And then eventually, after your time there, we ended up building our own classification engine, which is really cool. All right, so we're talking about the business challenges and how we solve them with the duty and the calculation. We talked a little bit about, and then the other piece of this is the country scale. So all of a sudden, actually, the rules are not the same for every country. So if I want to export this T-shirt to the UK, it's 5% duty. It's totally cool. Sending it to Brazil, 90% duty, and they're going to want some certificates. So how do we solve for that? That was the other biggest challenge, was actually getting the products classified turned out to be easier than figuring out then how do we send as many products as possible to as many countries as possible. And that's when we had to really start parsing data and fields and flags and figuring out how to group things together. And I talk a lot about using broad strokes because that's what we had to do, was solving for the most common denominator is a
I
lot of
remember
what we
going
did.
back to the product groups and saying, you need to add more data to the catalog so we can
We
do
need
this
more
for you.
data. Yeah, we need to pull more
And we'll
data.
promise you this much revenue because we
Yeah.
know we've got demand in other countries for your stuff.
Yep.
So it's worth your while to do the extra legwork to get your vendors to provide you what we need to do the classification, which we need to send overseas. It's like this
I
whole
totally
Rube
forgot we had to do
Goldberg
that.
machine.
I totally forgot we had to go back to the catalog teams or the product teams and say, "Hey, can you get this extra data?"
Well, we
The
started by going to the cat. This is the many startups world. So we know the data we want isn't in the product catalog. So we go to the product catalog guys and say, hey, we would like this data. And they're like, that's
You don't
nice. We
have it.
just run the catalog. We don't know where the data comes from.
Yeah.
And they're
Yep.
like, what the hell?
Then
Okay.
we had to go to the
Who do we talk
category team.
to get this data in there? Like, I don't know. This
Yeah.
this thing says it's from such and such product group. Go talk to them.
Yeah.
And
And that's what we did.
so we
Then I
did.
go talk to the product group, each individual product group. I don't even know how many were there at the time, at least 10. And we would tell them that we needed this additional information. What was interesting about that, though, is that they already all had it. We just weren't capturing it.
Well, there's a huge amount of useless stuff that their vendors provide to them. And one of the big pieces of work that the product teams did and probably still have to do is
Just
to
calling it out.
sort out all the stuff that they're getting and say, what are we actually going to surface to the customer? Because
Yeah.
Amazon, across many disciplines, like I had to do this in shipment tracking, they had to do it in the item catalog, tried to present as homogenous experience as possible, no matter
Yes.
what carrier your stuff is on, no matter what vendor your stuff is coming from. We want you to feel like it's one unified catalog or one unified
Yep.
experience.
Yeah.
And so they had a ton of decisions to make on a day-to-day basis as their vendors are coming online and offline and they're getting new ones and they're having old ones drop out,
Expanding. Yeah. It's a new
drop
product.
shipping things from different people,
Yeah.
which was a huge push at the time is to add
Yep.
lots more drop shippers. So the quality of data varied tremendously. Some of them didn't have it. Some of them had way more than they wanted.
Yep.
So they had their own universe of trouble to do this. And here we come saying, can you add 6 more things, please?
Because we got to have it. We got to have it. Yeah. So that was what was going on with the business and what kind of problems had to be solved in order to get the first cross-border e-commerce business off the ground and running. It still runs today. So that is us for today, or for this episode of Amazon Global. Andrew and I are going to be back, and we are going to talk more about how we implemented this and how it lives on. So we will see you again. Anything, Andrew, you want to leave us with?
No, I think that's it.
All right, awesome.